Imagine, it's 1998. You walk into a computer store looking for a new PC. One name dominates the shelves: Compaq. The company has become the world's largest personal computer manufacturer. Its machines sit in homes, schools, businesses, and government offices across the globe. Just a few years earlier, it had achieved what many believed was impossible. It had overtaken IBM, the company that had created the modern PC industry. Wall Street loved Compaq. Customers trusted it. Retailers depended on it. From the outside, it looked unstoppable. But while Compaq was celebrating its dominance, another company was quietly building a completely different way of selling computers. It didn't have the biggest factories. It didn't have the largest retail presence. In many cases, it didn't even build a computer until someone had already paid for it. That company was Dell. Within just a few years, Dell overtook Compaq. The world's largest PC manufacturer was suddenly struggling to compete. In 2002, Compaq disappeared after being acquired by Hewlett-Packard. It wasn't a bankruptcy, it wasn't an accounting scandal, and it wasn't because Dell built better computers. The real battle was happening somewhere customers could never see: inside warehouses, supply chains, inventory systems, cash flow, and one tiny business decision that completely changed the economics of the entire PC industry. This is the story of Compaq, the company that conquered the computer industry, only to discover that the biggest threat wasn't another computer, it was a better business system. To understand why Compaq disappeared, we have to go back to the very beginning of the personal computer industry. In 1981, IBM introduced the IBM personal computer. For businesses around the world, buying an IBM PC felt like the safest decision. IBM already had decades of trust in corporate computing. Its logo represented reliability, stability, and long-term support. The new IBM PC quickly became the standard that businesses wanted. But hidden inside IBM's success was a decision that would reshape the entire industry. Unlike many of its earlier computers, IBM didn't build every part itself. Instead, it purchased key components from outside companies. The processor came from Intel. The operating system came from Microsoft. Memory, storage, and many other parts came from specialist suppliers. IBM assembled them into one complete product. At first, this seemed like the fastest way to bring a personal computer to market, but it also meant something extraordinary. Much of the technology inside an IBM PC wasn't exclusive to IBM. Other companies could legally buy many of the exact same components. The biggest challenge wasn't the hardware, it was the BIOS. The Basic Input-Output System, or BIOS, is the small piece of software that starts a computer and allows the operating system to communicate with its hardware. IBM's BIOS was protected by copyright. Simply copying it would have been illegal. 3 former Texas Instruments executives believed there was another way. In 1982, Rod Canyon, Jim Harris, and Bill Murto founded Compaq. Their goal wasn't to build a cheaper computer. It was to build a computer that businesses could trust just as much as IBM's, while remaining fully compatible with the software companies already depended on. To achieve that, Compaq's engineers performed what became known as clean room reverse engineering. One team carefully studied what IBM's BIOS did, without copying its actual code. A completely separate team who had never seen IBM's original software then wrote brand new code that produced the same results. The final software was legally different but functionally compatible. It was one of the most important engineering achievements in early PC history. For the first time, customers could buy a computer from another manufacturer, run the same business software, and avoid paying IBM's premium prices. That breakthrough gave birth to the IBM-compatible PC industry. But compatibility alone wasn't enough to build a billion-dollar company. Compaq made another decision, one that would define its reputation for the next 15 years. Instead of competing to become the cheapest manufacturer, it chose to become the most trusted alternative to IBM. Its engineers focused relentlessly on quality. Every new processor, every expansion card, every hardware upgrade had to work reliably with the software businesses already relied upon. Large corporations couldn't afford unexpected failures. For them, reliability mattered more than saving a few $100s. That reputation spread quickly. IT managers began recommending Compaq. Corporate purchasing departments gained confidence in the brand. Distributors wanted to carry its products. Retailers wanted them on their shelves. Within just a few years, Compaq wasn't simply another PC manufacturer. It had become the company businesses trusted when they wanted IBM quality without buying an IBM computer. That reputation would fuel one of the fastest rises in corporate history. But it also created an operating model that would become increasingly difficult to change. By the early 1990s, Compaq had built far more than a successful computer company. It had built one of the most sophisticated distribution networks in the technology industry. To understand why that mattered, imagine you're the IT manager of a large company in 1993. You need 500 new computers. You can't wait weeks for every machine to be built. Your employees need them immediately. That is exactly the problem Compaq solved. Long before customers placed an order, Compaq was already manufacturing computers in huge volumes. Its factories produced thousands of machines every day. Those computers were shipped to regional warehouses across the world. From there, they moved to distributors. A distributor is a company that buys products in large quantities from manufacturers and supplies them to retailers or business resellers. Distributors allowed Compaq to reach thousands of businesses without building its own sales offices in every city. Many of those computers were then sold through value-added resellers, often called VARs. A value-added reseller doesn't simply sell a computer. It customizes the system, installs business software, configures company networks, provides technical support, and delivers complete technology solutions to corporate customers. For large organizations, this service was incredibly valuable. Instead of buying a computer from a shop, they bought an entire IT solution. By the time a customer decided to purchase, the computer was often already sitting nearby. Delivery could happen within days, sometimes within hours. For corporate buyers, speed mattered, predictability mattered, local support mattered. Compaq's entire operating system was designed to provide all three. It wasn't just selling computers, it was selling confidence. The system also benefited everyone involved. Factories stayed busy, distributors earned profits, retailers filled their shelves, VARs generated consulting income, customers received fast delivery. For nearly a decade, every participant in the supply chain made money. It was an extraordinary business machine. But there was one hidden assumption holding the entire system together. Compaq had to guess months in advance exactly what customers would want. How many computers, which processor, how much memory, how much storage, what screen size, what price. If those forecasts were correct, the system worked beautifully. If they were wrong, thousands of computers could end up sitting inside warehouses, slowly losing value before a single customer ever switched them on. For years, that risk barely mattered. The PC industry was expanding so quickly that most inventory eventually sold. But markets don't grow forever. And just as Compaq perfected this operating system, another company was asking a question nobody else was asking. What if you never had to guess at all?
In 1984, while Compaq was rapidly expanding, a 19-year-old university student named Michael Dell was looking at the computer industry from a completely different perspective. He wasn't an engineer trying to build a faster computer. He wasn't trying to invent a revolutionary processor. He wasn't even trying to create a famous brand. He was asking a much simpler question. Why does a computer become expensive before a customer even buys it? The more he studied the industry, the more one pattern stood out. By the time a customer purchased a computer, that machine had already traveled through an incredibly long journey. First, manufacturers bought thousands of components. Then factories assembled finished computers. Those computers were shipped into warehouses. Warehouses supplied distributors. Distributors sold to retailers. Retailers finally sold to customers. Every step added another cost, another delay, another profit margin, another opportunity for inventory to become outdated. Michael Dell believed many of those steps weren't creating value for the customer. They simply existed because the industry had always worked that way. Instead of asking, how do we build a better computer? He asked, what if we build computers only after someone orders one? It sounded almost impossible. Customers would have to wait while the computer was assembled. Most people believed they would never accept that. But Dell saw something others overlooked. Business customers didn't all want the same computer. One company needed more memory. Another needed a larger hard drive. A software developer wanted a faster processor. An accountant didn't. Building thousands of identical computers months in advance suddenly seemed inefficient. Why guess when customers could simply tell you exactly what they wanted? Dell began selling directly to customers. In the early years, orders arrived by telephone. Sales representatives helped customers choose their exact specifications. Only after the order was confirmed did assembly begin. Suppliers delivered the required components. Technicians built the computer. Every system was tested, then shipped directly to the customer. Instead of warehouses full of finished computers, Dell held mostly components, processors, memory modules, hard drives, power supplies. Those parts could be combined into thousands of different computer configurations. Even more importantly, individual components usually lost value far more slowly than fully assembled computers. If demand changed, Dell could simply assemble something different tomorrow. Compaq didn't have that luxury. Once a finished computer had already been built, its specifications were locked forever. Two companies, two completely different philosophies. One believed speed came from having computers already waiting. The other believed speed came from building exactly what customers had already chosen.
For several years, both systems appeared to work, but the economics underneath them were about to move in very different directions. For almost 15 years, Compaq's operating system had worked almost perfectly. Forecast demand, build computers, ship them around the world, sell them through distributors and retailers. Repeat. As long as demand kept growing, the machine kept working. But during the 1990s, another force was quietly changing the economics of the entire industry: technology itself. Unlike cars or furniture, a computer could become less valuable within months. Intel was releasing increasingly powerful processors at a remarkable pace. Every new generation offered faster performance, more features, and often lower prices than the generation before. Memory prices also fell rapidly as manufacturing improved. Hard drives became larger while costing less. CD-ROM drives, graphics cards, and other components followed the same pattern. For customers, this was fantastic. Every year, they could buy a faster computer for less money. For manufacturers, it created a problem unlike any other industry. Imagine Compaq builds 100,000 computers in January. Each machine contains the latest processor available at that time. The computers are shipped to warehouses across the world. Some remain there for weeks, some for months. Then Intel launches a newer processor. Suddenly, those computers aren't broken. They still work perfectly, but they're no longer the latest models. Customers begin comparing them with newer machines. Retailers ask for discounts. Businesses postpone purchases while evaluating the newer technology. Inventory that looked valuable just weeks earlier starts losing value every single day. This is known as inventory depreciation. It doesn't mean the products stop working. It means the market is no longer willing to pay yesterday's price. The longer a computer remains unsold, the more likely its value falls. Compaq now faced a painful choice: leave prices unchanged and risk computers sitting even longer, or reduce prices, accept lower profits, and move the inventory before it became even less valuable. But the pressure didn't stop there. Retailers had already purchased many of those computers from distributors. Distributors had already purchased them from Compaq. If Compaq suddenly reduced prices, retailers expected compensation. Otherwise, they would be left holding expensive inventory that customers could now buy elsewhere for less. This practice became known as price protection. Price protection meant manufacturers often reimbursed distributors or retailers when market prices fell shortly after inventory had been delivered. In other words, the financial pain didn't end when Compaq shipped a computer. It could continue for weeks or even months afterward. Now imagine this happening not once, but every time processor speeds increased, every time memory became cheaper, every time storage capacity improved. Every technological breakthrough made Compaq's warehouses slightly more dangerous. The company wasn't just storing computers anymore. It was storing products that were quietly losing value every single day. Dell was watching the exact same technological changes, but because most of its computers hadn't been built yet, those falling prices created a completely different opportunity. Instead of watching inventory lose value, Dell could buy the newer components at the newer prices and build the very next customer. The same industry, the same suppliers, the same technology, yet one business model became more expensive every month. The other became more powerful. By the late 1990s, the biggest difference between Compaq and Dell wasn't their computers. It wasn't their factories. It wasn't even their market share. It was how money moved through their businesses. Every business follows a cycle. Spend money, create a product, sell it, receive payment, then start again. The faster that cycle repeats, the more efficiently a company can grow. Compaq's cycle began with spending. Months before earning a single dollar, it purchased processors from Intel, memory from semiconductor manufacturers, hard drives from storage suppliers, motherboards, power supplies, cases, packaging, thousands upon thousands of components. Those parts became finished computers. The computers entered warehouses, then distributors, then retailers. Only after a customer finally bought the computer did money begin flowing back through the chain. That entire process could take months. During all that time, Compaq's own money was trapped inside inventory. Financial analysts measure this using something called the cash conversion cycle. The cash conversion cycle, often shortened to CCC, measures how many days a company's cash is tied up before it returns through customer payments. The longer the cycle, the more money the business must constantly invest just to keep operating. Dell's cycle looked almost backwards. A customer placed an order. Dell received the order. In many cases, payment arrived almost immediately. Only then did Dell purchase many of the required components from suppliers. Those suppliers often allowed Dell to pay their invoices weeks later under agreed payment terms. This meant something extraordinary. Dell frequently received cash from customers before it had paid many of its suppliers. Financially, its customers were helping finance its operations. Instead of borrowing large amounts of money to fill warehouses, Dell used incoming customer payments to keep the business moving. Economists describe this as negative working capital. Working capital is the money a business needs for its day-to-day operations. When working capital becomes negative, a company is effectively using supplier credit and customer payments to fund part of its business, instead of relying entirely on its own cash. For Dell, this wasn't a warning sign. It became one of its greatest competitive advantages. Every day, cash flowed into Dell's bank accounts. Every day, that cash could be invested back into growth. New factories, better customer service, more efficient logistics, technology improvements, global expansion. Compaq faced the opposite reality. Its cash was already committed to warehouses, committed to inventory, committed to products waiting for buyers. The company could still be profitable on paper, while simultaneously having billions of dollars tied up in computers that hadn't yet been sold. When markets slowed or prices fell, that trapped cash became an enormous burden. Dell's business became stronger every time it completed another customer order. Compaq's business became stronger only after inventory successfully made its way through every stage of the distribution chain. One company was waiting for customers. The other already had customers waiting. That difference changed everything. Because when competition became more intense, cash wasn't just another financial metric. Cash became a weapon. By the late 1990s, the warning signs were becoming impossible to ignore. Dell was growing rapidly. Its costs were falling. Its inventory moved faster. Its profits continued improving. Inside Compaq, executives understood the threat. This wasn't a company asleep at the wheel. They could see exactly what Dell was doing. The problem was that understanding the solution and being able to implement it were two very different things. From the outside, it seemed simple: sell directly to customers, reduce inventory, build computers after orders arrive. But Compaq wasn't starting from zero. It was carrying the weight of an entire business ecosystem. Thousands of distributors depended on Compaq products. Retail chains had invested heavily in selling its computers. Value-added resellers built their businesses around installing, supporting, and maintaining Compaq systems. These partners weren't just customers, they were part of Compaq's operating system. If Compaq suddenly began selling directly to end customers, why would a retailer continue promoting Compaq instead of another manufacturer? Why would a distributor continue investing in warehouses full of Compaq products? Why would a value-added reseller recommend Compaq if the manufacturer had become its competitor? The very partners that had helped build Compaq into a global giant could quickly become its biggest obstacle. This is known as channel conflict. Channel conflict occurs when a manufacturer begins competing against the distributors or retailers that traditionally sell its products, creating tension throughout the sales network. For Compaq, channel conflict wasn't a theoretical risk. It threatened relationships that had taken more than a decade to build. At the same time, another strategic decision was demanding management's attention. In 1998, Compaq completed the acquisition of Digital Equipment Corporation, often called DIC, for approximately $9.6 billion. Digital wasn't just another PC company, it was one of the world's most respected enterprise computing businesses. It sold powerful servers, networking equipment, software, and consulting services to governments, banks, and large corporations. The acquisition was designed to transform Compaq from a PC manufacturer into a complete enterprise technology company. On paper, the strategy made sense. Enterprise customers generated higher margins, long-term service contracts created recurring revenue, and Digital brought thousands of experienced engineers and consultants into the business. But integrating two global technology companies was enormously complex. Different product lines, different sales teams, different corporate cultures, different manufacturing operations, different support organizations. While management focused on integration, the PC market continued changing underneath them. Dell remained focused on one objective: making its operating system faster, leaner, and more efficient with every passing quarter. Compaq was now trying to achieve two difficult missions at the same time: protect the business model that had built its success while transforming into an entirely different company. Neither challenge was easy. Trying to do both simultaneously proved even harder. The race was no longer about who could build the best computer. It had become a race over who could adapt their business system before the market moved again. And time was running out for Compaq. By 1999, the numbers were becoming impossible to ignore. Dell wasn't just growing faster than Compaq, it was becoming a fundamentally more profitable business. Its factories built computers faster. Its inventory turned over dramatically quicker. Its cash kept flowing. While Compaq's operating system was fighting against the market, Dell's operating system was working with it. The gap widened every quarter. Dell could reduce prices without destroying its profitability. Compaq often couldn't. Every price reduction squeezed margins that were already under pressure from inventory costs, channel incentives, and the enormous expense of maintaining its global distribution network. The very scale that had once protected Compaq was now slowing it down. Management launched restructuring programs. Manufacturing was streamlined. Costs were reduced. Thousands of jobs were eliminated as the company tried to become leaner. Entire business units were reviewed. Operations were consolidated. But restructuring couldn't solve the underlying problem. It could reduce expenses. It couldn't change the economics of the business model. At the same time, the integration of Digital Equipment Corporation was proving far more difficult than expected. Enterprise customers expected one unified technology company. Instead, many parts of the organization were still operating independently. Sales teams had different priorities. Product portfolios overlapped. Engineering resources were spread across too many platforms. Management attention was divided. While Compaq was integrating yesterday's acquisition, Dell was preparing for tomorrow's customer order. In 2001, Dell officially became the world's largest personal computer manufacturer. It had overtaken the very company that once seemed impossible to catch. For Compaq, the pressure was becoming unbearable. Investors were losing confidence. Growth had slowed. Profitability had weakened. The company's share price reflected a business searching for a new direction. Then came the announcement that shocked Silicon Valley. In September 2001, HP announced it would acquire Compaq in a deal valued at approximately $25 billion. The proposal immediately divided investors. Supporters argued the combined company would become powerful enough to challenge IBM across enterprise technology, while creating the world's largest PC manufacturer. By combining manufacturing, research, sales, and global operations, HP believed it could save billions of dollars through economies of scale. Economies of scale occur when producing or operating at a larger size reduces the average cost of each product or service. The bigger the business, the lower many costs become per unit. But critics weren't convinced. Leading the opposition was Walter Hewlett, the son of Hewlett-Packard co-founder Bill Hewlett. He argued HP wasn't solving its problems, it was buying another company facing the very same challenges. According to critics, combining two struggling PC businesses wouldn't create one strong business, it could simply create one much larger problem. The debate became one of the most controversial corporate battles in technology history. Both sides launched public campaigns. Investors received presentations, advertisements, letters, and financial projections explaining why they should vote for or against the merger. Months of intense lobbying followed. Finally, in March 2002, HP shareholders approved the merger by an incredibly narrow margin. After nearly 2 decades as one of the most respected names in computing, Compaq ceased to exist as an independent company. Not through bankruptcy, not through fraud, not because customers stopped buying computers, but because the business system that once made it the industry's champion could no longer compete with the economics of a changing market. When the merger officially closed in May 2002, the Compaq name didn't disappear overnight. Millions of customers were still using Compaq computers. Large corporations still depended on Compaq servers. Government agencies still had long-term support contracts. For a period of time, HP continued selling products under both brands. But behind the scenes, the integration had already begun. Factories were consolidated. Engineering teams were merged. Product lines were reviewed. Duplicated departments were eliminated. Thousands of employees across both companies lost their jobs as HP removed overlapping roles to reduce costs. Some Compaq products survived. Others quietly disappeared. In the following years, the famous red Compaq logo slowly vanished from new computers. Eventually, one of the most recognizable names in personal computing became part of history. The merger itself remains one of the most debated decisions in technology history. Supporters point to billions of dollars in cost savings, a stronger position against IBM, and a much larger global customer base. Critics point out that integrating two enormous organizations consumed years of management attention. The PC business continued operating on thin margins, and many of the competitive pressures that had challenged Compaq didn't disappear simply because the company had a new owner. In many ways, both sides were right. The merger created a bigger company, but size alone wasn't enough to solve the industry's structural problems. Meanwhile, Dell kept doing what it had always done: refining its operating system, improving its supply chain, reducing inventory, shortening delivery times, strengthening relationships with suppliers, and generating cash faster than many competitors could imagine. The company continued expanding across enterprise technology, servers, storage, and business services. Years later, Dell itself would make one of the largest technology acquisitions in history by purchasing EMC, transforming from a PC manufacturer into a global enterprise technology powerhouse. Ironically, it achieved that transformation from a position of financial strength, not financial pressure. Compaq's story leaves behind one of the most important lessons in modern business. The company wasn't destroyed by poor engineering. Its products were respected. Its employees were talented. Its leadership wasn't incapable. In fact, many of the decisions that made Compaq successful during the 1980s were logical, disciplined, and highly effective. The tragedy was that those same decisions became increasingly dangerous as the market evolved. The company had optimized itself for yesterday's economics, while Dell was building for tomorrow's. This is known as structural inertia. Structural inertia describes the tendency of successful organizations to keep operating the way they always have because the existing system has worked for so long. The larger and more successful a company becomes, the harder it often is to fundamentally reinvent itself. Compaq didn't disappear because it stopped innovating. It disappeared because changing an entire business system is far harder than improving a product. The customers never saw the warehouses. They never saw the forecasting meetings. They never saw the inventory write-downs. They never saw the cash conversion cycle. But those invisible systems determined the future of one of the world's greatest computer companies. Products win customers. Business systems determine who survives. And sometimes the greatest risk facing a market leader is believing the system that made it successful will always work tomorrow. That is the story of Compaq.